Hello to you too, from Chicago. I'm in sunny Richmond, Virginia. Hopefully everybody's going to be able to hear me okay. We'll get started in just a minute. Depending on where you are viewing this, either in Google Hangouts or over on YouTube, there should be a way for you to submit questions and comments to me. I see people are still kind of streaming in, so I'm going to give them just another minute. Hello, Sean from Canada. I'm sure my weather is a lot nicer here than you're having right now. All right, well, I don't want to waste anybody's time. Oh, thank you, Rebecca. I don't want to waste anybody's time. I know your time is valuable. So I'm going to jump right in, and for those folks that are joining later, they'll be able to see the recording. I haven't used live Google Hangouts on air before, but as I understand it, it's going to save all of this for posterity on YouTube. So that'll be cool. Automatic recording there. So I'm going to jump in right now with, speaking of the Hangout, a little bit about the Google Hangout. As I said, I haven't used it before. Playing around with a little bit, I detect about a 60-second delay, so, well, 45 to 60-second delay between me speaking and you hearing it. So some of your questions might be coming in a little later for me. So what I'll do is every once in a while, I'll just take like a little mini break to give myself time to catch up on your questions as you go through. And let's see, let me scroll through and look at some of the questions. Great, everybody's saying they can hear me. That's awesome. Sweden, wow, nice. All right, and then also I wanted to mention that I'm going to be jumping back and forth from Storyline itself to a published Storyline file. The reason why I'm doing that is it just takes a few seconds to, for the preview to compile on something, and I don't want to waste our time waiting, just watching a progress bar. So rather than hit the preview on a slide, I'll just jump over to this published course that I already have here. So there'll be a little bit of screen switching back and forth, so I hope I can keep it under control and it doesn't give anybody a hard time. Also, I wanted to mention that this is, by all means, not a complete list of all the new features in Articulate Storyline 2, but hopefully it'll be a good springboard for you, a good jumping point to explore it and get excited about all these awesome new features that they have in there. So you might be wondering who I am. I am James Kingsley. I should probably pull something up on that. I'm James Kingsley, and I've been in the e-learning industry for about 16 years now. I was one of the early Articulate MVPs, which they now call Articulate Superheroes. That doesn't mean I work for them or anything. It just means that I play around with their stuff a lot, and they like what I did. And I help out in the forums a good bit too. I tend to focus more on kind of the more complex interactions and trickery, if you will. I do a lot of JavaScript and that type of thing. My company, we create online courses ourselves, and we also create a lot of things to help support online training as well, web apps and mobile apps. And we create widgets to help you increase your training too. Oh, people are checking in from Rome, Italy too. Nice. I lived in Sicily for 3 years. Italy is awesome. All right. So let me jump right in here and show you the first thing. One of the coolest things I think in the new version of Storyline, and that is sliders. And so a slider is this piece in the middle here, and I've labeled it here so that you can see the different parts, because in a second we're going to talk a little bit about how you can format your own slider and control it. And so it's important you understand these parts to it. Also, if I get going too fast, somebody shoot me a note because I tend to talk real fast. So the way a slider works is just like the name implies, you can pick it up and slide it. Slides along this track. So you grab the thumb, slide along the track. And you might notice that this variable is changing down here at the bottom. It's setting the value as I slide it. So let's jump over to our Storyline file, and I'll show you how I created that. Dropping a slider in is really straightforward in Storyline 2. You're going to go to the Insert tab, Controls, and Sliders, and just drop it right in there like that. You can change the size, and you can change the size of the thumb. I'm going to get that one out of the way. When you have a slider selected, on the ribbon bar, there's a Slider Tools section, and that contains two tabs, a Design and a Format tab. On the Design tab, we can see that as soon as you drop it in there, Storyline creates for you a variable to be attached to that slider. it cleverly names it whatever your slider is named when you dropped it in, and so this was my second slider, so it was named slider 2. As a habit, I usually, one of the first things I do is change those, because eventually you could end up with 10 sliders and then trying to remember, you know, is it slider 1, slider 2, slider 3. So from here, a couple other options I have is I can control the values of it. Do I want it to go from 1 to 10? Do I want it to go from 8 to 1008? You can put in whatever numbers you want there for the values of the slider. And then you can set your initial position at the value of 5. And do you want it to jump once or twice or however many steps when the slider is moved along. Now when the slider is moved, right now, we're updating the variable when the slider is dragged. You can change that and say when the student releases it if you don't need it to update when it's dragged. The slider controls the variable slide 2, but interestingly enough, the variable can also control the slider as well. So you can make the slider jump to a particular position with a trigger. Let me pull my course back over. You can see I'll drag the slider up to 10, but if I click this button, it sets the value to 5, and it made the slider jump to 5 as well. So that can have a lot of cool uses in your course, because you can have the student make some decisions and then adjust the slider based on those decisions, maybe even based off the points awarded for a question or something. You could adjust the slider. So you can also, because you get to format these sliders in all kinds of crazy ways, you can do crazy things with them. So here I've taken sliders and turned them into basically little toggle switches. So this looks very much like the Apple toggle on and off there. And that's fairly straightforward to do in here, because essentially what we're doing is I created a new state for my slider called on, and I just changed everything to green there. I set up some triggers so that when the value of the slider changes, if it changes to 1, then I set the slider to the on state, and then I set it back to normal if the value is 0. So that's kind of a cool way to do maybe a list of preferences for the course. Do they want audio? And yes, to Mandy in the UK, I will be, it's automatically recorded and it will be available on YouTube. Sorry for the audio going in and out. So another cool, I'm going to say cool like 1,000 times, I know it, is on this one, I can make this meter spin as I drag the slider and pull it back and forth. So that's a nice way to possibly simulate an actual tool or something. So I'm putting the value here and I'm spinning the needle there on the meter. And that one was done by using 10 different states of that needle. And then when the slider is dragged and that slider 1 variable changes, then I just update the needle to be, you know, state 1, state 3, state 6, whatever it needs to be to match the slider. Here's another one where we're using a different type of slider. There's a lot of them built in here. You can actually, on the Format tab, you can see that there's all kinds of different styles built in. Square ones, round ones, triangle ones. And when you insert, you have a couple of different choices as well. Round, square, and then I don't know what they're calling this one. So on this one I used the little triangle one. And again, I just changed the state of the slider itself to indicate the condition here. So this one could be like a danger level, where, you know, everything's fine, there's no danger. Now we're in the yellow zone, and then we're in the red zone. And then this one, here, let me show it to you in the course first. And by the way, I will also post this .story file on my website somewhere, and I'll put the link in the Google Hangouts event page, or maybe under the YouTube. Maybe I'll put it in both places, so that you can download this story file and you can see how I created these, and you can play around with them yourself. So that's if you have Storyline 2, and why wouldn't you? So this last slider I'm going to show you is an image fill. And believe it or not, this is a slider that I have set up on here. So what we're asking the learner to do here is to position this car a safe following distance from this truck. So they can grab the car and slide it along the slider to where they feel is the correct following distance from the truck. And let me show you how I did that one. And here we go. Sorry, I got distracted looking at questions. So this is a slider. You see when I select it, I have my slider tools, I've got my design, and my format. Like many, many other objects in Storyline, you can choose to fill the object with a color or with a image or pattern. So what I did is I filled the track with this road, and I filled the thumb with the image of this car. And you can still resize the thumb at will, up and down, and I could resize the track too, but I don't want to make that too big. It'll stretch the image out. So I'll show you how that works real quick. If I go to the Format tag, I have a choice between, on this side, my thumb format, and on this side, my track format. So if I wanted to, say, replace the yellow car with a green car, go to my thumb fill, picture, and I have a green car here. And there we go. That's all there is to it. So I think that really opens up your imagination on things that you could do with sliders in there. And keep in mind, you could do this the reverse too. You could have them, instead of grab the car and drag it, you could use triggers, either buttons or within the slide itself, to adjust the slider value, and that would move the car back and forth on there too. Alright, so that's my first section on sliders. I'm going to pause just a moment to let questions come in. While I do that, I'm going to show you my Built Clean website. So at Built Clean, that's my main company. We own a couple of other companies too. We develop web applications, mobile applications, desktop applications. We own eLearning Enhanced, we do Android apps, and we own ReviewMyElearning.com. So you can come on over there if you need a website built, or you need to get your LMS to work with your CMS, whatever types of web applications or mobile applications you need, we can help you out with that. Let me see. There's some questions about sliders. I see somebody posted a link for other examples of sliders. I'm not sure if what shows up in here is seen by everybody. Let me see if I can reshare that. There we go. I think maybe you're seeing that now. So I'm going to move on to the next section, which is about motion paths. And you saw that my little circle just made a arc when it moved. And it wasn't an entrance animation, it wasn't an exit animation. It was just on the screen, and then it moved in an arc. I think we've all been wanting motion paths for quite some time in Storyline. It's really going to help create fantastic e-learning. So let me start by showing you the parts of a motion path. And what I did was I grabbed a screenshot so I could label it. So this is a screenshot of a motion path right here. And oh, we did have a question on sliders. What is the purpose of a slider? So it can be used for all kinds of things. You could ask your students what is their level of confidence in the topic, and they could grab the slider, move it back and forth. You could ask them how full should the vial be, and they could drag the slider back and forth. So I think right now, some of us, I know I myself, haven't had a chance to incorporate a slider just yet because sliders isn't something we could ever do before, so it's not something that we thought about. I did have a course where we needed to adjust the image of a person from sad to happy depending on the customer service level, and we had a really hard time building. They wanted like a slider thing so that you could adjust we had a really hard time building that. So that is one instance where I know I definitely could have used the new sliders because the learner could have drugged the customer happiness, and then you would have seen the person, their smile increase on the screen. So hopefully that answers your question. It could be used for all kinds of things. Let your imagination run free. All right, so back to motion paths. So for a motion path, the dotted line there is the path. There's a start and an end. And let me jump over to my object. So this is the object that I have the path applied to. And as you can see, when you're looking at that object, you don't see any path. And even when I select the object, I don't see the path. It's not until I go to the Animations tab that I'll see the path on there. Something I didn't have in my screenshot is if you select the path itself, you get this sort of translucent version of the object at the other side of the path. So you can see where the object is going to end up at once it has finished moving along the path. Once you've selected a motion path, you have or even really the object that the path is attached to, you have the motion path options from the top here. And I'll just talk through the menu a little bit here. Actually, I guess what I should do first is show you how to put a motion path on something. So let me drop an object in here real quick. And then, same as you apply any other animation, with that object selected, I have entrance animations, exit animations, and now I have motion path. So I can say I would like it to go in a straight line. And there it is. It drops it in there, and I can move it to wherever I want it to go. You get a couple of options here, like the duration, how long it's going to take to get there, the direction that you want it to go in, whether or not you want the starting point to be locked in a particular place or unlocked. We'll talk a little bit about these in just a moment. Easing, the speed of the easing, the path direction, you can reverse that, and relative starting point. Like I said, I'll go over some of those on these next few slides. Check for questions. All right. So I'm going to show you this slide in the course so you can see, get a feel for what it's doing. So all those little green balls dropped at essentially the same time and stopped at the same time. But you'll notice that, and I'll replay it, you'll notice that they all go at different speeds and they end up at different times. But when we go back and look at my course, I can see that each one of these is the exact same 2 seconds. And what's making the difference is the easing options. So on this first one, this is the default easing, in and out. If you're not familiar with easing in animation, it's just the concept that when you when an item moves in real life, it doesn't normally move at the exact same speed from start to end. A lot of times things start out slow, build speed, and then slow down before they stop. If you think about a car, going from red light to red light, starts out slow, gets to speed, slows down before the next red light. So that would be easing in and out there. There's tons of easing options in here. You can choose to ease only in, only out. You can choose no easing. You can set the speed, so how quickly should it slow down at the end. And you can even choose to have it bounce at on the easing point. You can have it bounce on both ends of the ease when motion starts and when the motion ends. Gives you a lot of control of the motion. Now that you know what we're selecting there and choosing, if you watch it again, it makes a little bit more sense what's happening there. One of them does actually bounce. Let's see. That's just one on the end. That I used the bounce for that one. All right. Moving on to the motion path triggers, you'll see that down the side here, for each one of these motion paths, there is a trigger that says move that oval on line motion path 1 when the timeline starts. That's the default. Let me show you how that works. When I first put an object, or put a motion path on an object, you'll see right now I only have a couple of triggers over here, but when I add a motion path to it, now I have a new trigger that says move snip single corner rectangle 1 along motion path 2 when the timeline starts. So it automatically created that for me. If you don't want it to start when the timeline starts, then you're just going to want to delete that trigger. So now I don't have anything that triggers this rectangle along its motion path. So then, you might be wondering, how else can you trigger that? Basically, you can use any of the triggers that are built into Storyline. So in this case, I have a button, and I told it to move the oval 1 along line motion path 1 when the user clicks the button. I'll pull that over here and show it to you. So there it is. When I hit the button, moves it right along the path. Something to note here is when I am selecting which motion path I want it to move onto, it highlights that. It comes in handy because you can actually create multiple motion paths for one object. So on this next screen, you'll see I have one object and it has 4 motion paths attached to it. Each one is moving it left or right or up or down, and I created buttons that trigger that along the path so that it'll move left or right. So now, because they're all named 1, 2, 3, 4, if I don't remember what order I created them in, or if I had 10 of them on the screen, I might start getting lost into which one is which. But being able to highlight it when I mouse over these really helps a lot in figuring that out there. And I'll show you what that slide looks like in the course here. So first I'll move it up, and then I'm going to move it to the right. Oh, did you see how that works? It kind of jumps back into the middle before it goes. So it's over there, and now I want it to move down, and it jumps back in the middle. So what's happening there is the motion path, let me select it. The motion path is currently, the origin is unlocked. And it does not have a relative start point. In other words, it's going to always start its motion from wherever the green dot is on my screen. So if I was to move this someplace else, then it would always start from wherever the object is. There are a bunch of different options for that. Let me show you first in the course. These start and end points. So that's the default one that we saw. Now this is relative. So it's going to move, unlike this one, when I click this one it jumps back. Relative means move from wherever you currently are. So when I click it, it's just going to keep moving along that path each time I click it. Locked is a little bit different. Locked basically means that I can move the motion path anywhere I want, irregardless to where, irregardless isn't a word, with no regard to where the actual object exists. So when I do that, then what I'm saying is I want, when they click the button, I want this object to teleport, jump over here, and then move slowly to this other position. And I'll show you what that looks like here. Jumped over and then move slowly. If you combine those, now it's going to jump over, move slowly, jump over, move slowly. So the one I find most useful is this relative one. I haven't yet dreamed up a use for these other ones, but I'm sure once we all get to working with it, then we'll be able to find plenty of uses for them. One thing that I came up with for the motion path, the relative motion path, is this slide where I have a bar and I have this circle, and I can drag the bar, and as I drag the bar to the circle runs away from it there. And essentially, all I'm doing on that is I create a trigger to move the object along the motion path when the bar comes over it. So my trigger is move oval 1 along motion path 1 when the rectangle is dragged over the oval. And so that makes it look like the ball is trying to run away from the rectangle there. And then just to combine some of those together, what I did here was I changed those paths to start at the relative point so that the ball will move from wherever it currently is along the path rather than jump back to its original spot. And that allows us to create something like this, where we can go move it all around the screen whichever way we want. All right. I'm going to give you a chance to catch up on questions. Aha! I've been looking at the questions the wrong way. Can you show the timeline with the motion path? Oh, can I show the timeline with the motion path? Sure can. The timeline on a motion path, it doesn't really show up at all down here. Just like if you had a fade-in animation, you wouldn't see it on the timeline down here. That you wouldn't say fade in. You wouldn't see any indicator that it's there. So it doesn't show up on your timeline anywhere, which is nice because it's not related to the time in the slide. But it would be nice to have possibly an indicator there as well. Rebecca thinks it's cool. So do I. Oh, I can +1 that in there. Well, we want to know, let me select that. Well, we want to know if you can use templates from Storyline 2 and 1. No, Storyline 2 is not backwards compatible to Storyline 1. So any work that you do in Storyline 2, you're not going to be able to open that file in Storyline 1. If you open a Storyline 1 file with Storyline 2, it will automatically save a backup for you. It'll prompt you, it'll let you know, and it'll save a backup for you so that you can always go back to that Storyline 1 version. But it's not backwards compatible, but it is forwards compatible. Somebody said we can see it. Good. Okay. I personally have not tried importing from PowerPoint into Storyline, mostly because I find I like being able to just build things myself in Storyline rather than import from another tool. From what I've seen in the forums, I think it does work. I could be wrong. I know that there's a couple other articulate power users watching, so if somebody wants to shoot me a note about that one. So I'm not 100% sure, I guess, is what I'm saying, is whether or not motion path carries over from storyline when imported. Sorry, I don't know that one. Can you adjust the path of the line? Great question. So adjusting the path of a line, you can. So in this case, if I didn't want it to go straight up, I can grab it and I can pull it over here. Adjusting it this way, like if I wanted to add a point to it, not really possible. I believe, no. So you need to plan it out a little bit in advance. And I will say that if you were working on small incremental things such as this, let me get them all in place, you're going to have a hard time grabbing the correct path and finding the right one and adjusting it, etc. So if you have a more complicated motion path, then you really want to plan that out in advance and be sure you know what you're doing before you get into it. For most of the time, it's not a problem. You can just draw them right on the screen. You do have a couple of other options here. If I did apply a new motion path to it, I've got arcs and turns, triangles, squares. So let me drop something in there. Well, I probably already answered the question. I don't need to keep going on. Animations. So if I did this turn, so you see it made the turn go down. I'll move this up so you can see it. It made it go that way. So if I want to change where it ends up or the shape of it, I can drag it around like that, and it's always going to kind of be that turn there. I can make it wider, but it's not a precise thing. So it takes a little bit of planning. All right. Let's see, where are we now? Find my course. It's like that. And here we go. So next up, I'm not going to bore you with this. So we have eLearning Enhance. That's where we can develop courses. We've got widgets. Also, of note, we have a blog on eLearning Enhance where I often post a lot of storyline stuff that, or articulate stuff or eLearning stuff in general. So a lot of it has to do with like JavaScript and extending the tools beyond what they were originally intended to do. So let's jump over to triggers. And you see here I've got these three boxes that change color. And let me show you that again. So what happens here, let me just hit the rewind. So one changed color, then the second one, and then that one changes color when that box goes into it there. That little floaty box that went by there. And so I use those to illustrate these. It doesn't mean much looking at it here from the learner point of view, but when we get into how that was created, these are new events, is what I'm calling them. It's part of the when statement of a trigger. So if you're familiar with triggers in Storyline, you have the action, how I want to change the state of this object, which is called time because it has the word time in it. I'm going to change it to the visited state, which is that blue color. And the when, or the event, is when the timeline reaches the time of 1 second. Now that is pretty cool and totally new for Storyline 2. So basically we're saying no matter what else is going on the slide, when it gets to 1 second, change the state of that to visited. And that's pretty cool. One way that we used to get around not having triggers like this before is we would draw objects off the side of the screen. I'm not sure if any of you did that before, but you just draw an object on the side of the screen, you would place it at the 1 second mark on your timeline, and then you would create a trigger that says when that object is visible, then change the state of this object. It was a workaround and it was kludgy at best, So this is so much cooler that now we can just say, hey, when the timeline hits 1 second, change that state. Now, even cooler, let me double check my questions here. Even cooler, I think, is the new one that says cue point. And so what we're doing on this one is we're saying change the state of the box to visited when the timeline reaches a cue point. For those of you are not familiar with cue points, it's this little number 1 that I have down here on the screen. And so what we're saying is when it hits cue point number 1, which right now happens to be at 2.21 seconds, then we want to change that. What's awesome about that is I can grab that cue point and move it. So if I preview my slide and I decide, you know what, I really need that to happen a second before, then all I have to do is move this cue point around on there, and that state's going to change whenever it hits that cue point. For those of you not familiar with cue points, you can set your timeline marker someplace, right-click, and say create cue point at the playhead, and now I have a second cue point on there too. So now when I looked at that, when I say change a cue point, I have a choice of cue point 1 or cue point 2. That's pretty awesome that we can do that now. And then the third one, the third new trigger that we have in here, or event as I'm calling them, is when animation completes. So just to back up, I have, it's hard to see here because it's behind there, but I have this little box that's floating in from the side of the screen, and it's going to stop right underneath this green box. And what I want to happen is, once again, no matter where I am on the timeline, what's going on the screen, when this thing stops moving, I want this box to turn to its state. So with this new trigger of when animation completes, it allows us to do just that. And the cool thing is it asks me, which object is being animated, so it's this little rectangle box that's coming in, and I have a choice of which animation, because I could have more than one animation applied to that object. Maybe it's a motion path, maybe it's the fade in or the fade out, or entrance or exit animation. So I can select which animation I want to trigger this happening on over here. So that's pretty cool. If you think about it, now you can start stringing together a bunch of animations. So you could have a motion path that's triggered by a button, and when the object is done reaching the motion path, something else fades in on top of that one. So it allows you to start chaining together these animations. And then that was sort of the new when things. These are some new actions that you can take in triggers. So one of the things that we can start doing now is controlling the next button and the previous button that is part of the player itself. Let me give you an example of that. So here's my next button, and let's say I want it disabled. When it's in the disabled state, the learner is not going to be able to click it to move to the next slide. If I think maybe they're going to be confused by it being just grayed out like that, I could actually hide the button. That changes the UI a little bit, makes the bar stretch out, and now the previous button is where the next button is. So I actually prefer the disabled setting for it. And then I can also enable it. Now, in this example, I'm just doing that with buttons, but you probably wouldn't be doing that in your course. If you think about it, a great place to use this would be if you have a complex interaction or you have a video or something, and you want to make sure that they don't hit the next button until they've reached the end of that video or they completed the interaction. And so then you would set a trigger for your slide to be for the next button for your slide to be disabled as soon as the timeline starts. And then whenever the user has completed the interaction, you would have another trigger to enable the next button. Another two cool actions that we have is we can now, with a trigger, pause or resume the slide. So I'm going to do it here with a button. I'll play it again. Oops. I'll play the slide again. So I just got those balls moving so you can see what's happening here. I'm going to hit pause, and you can see the timeline has stopped completely. And I can hit resume, and everything goes back to what it was doing. Pause, resume. Again, you might have a button for this if you're using, instead of using the built-in navigation, you're using custom navigation, then you might want to build yourself a pause resume button. But I think it could be more interesting for, let's say, if the user, you have a bunch of animations going and the user clicks to watch a video, you might want to pause all the animations and play just that video on that layer there. And jumping over to the triggers, those are all done with the standard trigger wizard. So there we're changing the state of the next button. You can also change the previous button. And then for the pause and resume, those are just listed under the actions here. So they're one of the new ones here. Pause timeline and resume timeline. They're under the more section on there. All right, I'll give you a chance to catch up on some questions. And let me jump over and do a little bit more self-promoting. So for those of you that aren't using reviewmyearlearning.com, I can't imagine why you're not. Awesome site. Lets you upload your SCORM course and send invites to developers and reviewers, where reviewers can come view the course and make comments within the course. So when the reviewer is watching your course, they'll get a little form at the bottom where they can complete the form, tell you what's wrong with that slide or what's great about that slide. They can save that. All the comments from all the reviewers get put into one big table for you, so you can go through, look at all the comments, assign them to somebody, make comments. You can have a discussion, a collaboration on the comment, and you can edit the comment, etc. All right, let's see what questions we have. What is the smallest possible time span we can have on the timeline? That's a great question. I haven't tried it. So this one has a duration of 5. I can go down to 0.10 on it. I believe that's what your question was about. So I can have that animate in at 0.10. Let's try it with a motion path real quick. Here, I'll just add a motion path to that. Animations, add motion path. Yep, 0.10. So there's an improvement for you, something new that I didn't even know about. 0.10 seconds seems like it would be incredibly fast, jumping from there to there. But all right, let me see if there's any other questions on that section. Nope. All right, so finally we're going to jump into sort of what I'm just calling the other stuff. Let me pull over my course. So there are tons of new animations in Storyline. So right here, I think I'm highlighting 10 new animations. These are entrance animation, there's new exit animations, and of course there's the new path animations that we just saw. There's also new transitions too, which I didn't put together for this. So I have this little slide, and I just basically I'm animating in a little green highlight box with that particular animation, which is kind of nice, I think, because sometimes when I read the description, I'm like, I don't really know what that means. And then there's that's the basic for that animation. For some of them, there's options too. So that one, I did the shape effect, and then I have a choice: do I want the shape to fill in or to fill out? What shape do I want to use? Circle, box, diamond, plus. Do I want it to come in from the left or right as well? So the combination of different animations that you can do is just amazing, all the different animations. Motion, sorry, not motion, the animation painter. Wow, what a time saver this is going to be. So this is one of the areas where the folks at Articulate really did a great job of helping us save time and make our courses more consistent. So if we take a look at this green box, I've got 3 animations on it right now. It's going to grow in, it's going to move along this motion path, and then it's going to swivel out. So let me see if I can play that for you. Not much to see really. It grows in, exit out, and then a little swivel when it's gone. There we go. So now I've drawn a circle on there, and it has none of those. If I select my square, click the animation painter, and then click the circle, boom! Now it has the exact same 3 animations applied to it. Pretty cool. It would work if you had a whole bunch of motion paths applied to it, if you had a complex grow in and spin to the left and animation. Very cool. It's going to save you a lot of time. Build it once, apply it to other objects. Pretty cool stuff right there. Something that a lot of us wanted for a long time is dockable panels. Sometimes you're really trying to zoom in on the slide and you want to be able to see the entire thing at once. So now you can actually just tear these panels right off, drag them to your other monitor if you want. So I just pulled off the slide layers and the triggers panel, so now I have the whole area to the side there now. You can pull the scenes off as well. To put anything back, you just hit the redock button. You can also pull the timeline states and notes off from the bottom. I'm going to put all these back. That's really nice when you're trying to get in there and you want to see the whole slide and get some things out of your way, some of these panels out of your way. Very cool. It's great that they added that. So you may have been keeping track of how many times I said cool, because it sure does seem like a lot. Let's see now. Where are we going next? Dockable panels. Another one that is going to save you a ton of time. Now, this particular layer, you see here, I have my base layer, and then I create a new layer where it is called meeting. I've got 2 people animating in, one from the left, one from the right. So not a lot going on this layer, but just for illustration purposes, I can right-click on that, and I can duplicate that layer. I can copy it. I could paste it right here if I wanted to, or even better, I can just bring it over to another slide, right-click, and paste it there. And there's my 2 guys on my new layer there. It takes all the stuff with it, the triggers that you have set up, and the logic that's applied to them. It's very cool, and that's going to save you a lot of time. I said cool again. It's going to save you a lot of time. Text editor. They made a lot of enhancements to the text editor. This is one of those things where sometimes it could drive you crazy in Storyline 1. Basically, what happened in Storyline 1 is if your zoom was set at anything other than 100%, sometimes when you clicked in it, everything would get rearranged in there, and it would change the font size and wrap things around. As soon as you click back out, everything was back to normal again. But it made it hard to edit and view how it was going to look at the exact same time. The new text editor is a thing of beauty, and I have not had any problems at all with it. There's tons of options. I'm not as into making sure that all my text is just right, mainly because I'm not a very detail-oriented person in regards to that. But there are tons of options in there for your text direction and alignment and nudging things left and right, spacing between lines, etc. You can also create custom bullet symbols. So here I'm using the telephone as my bullet point. So if I add another phone number here, it worked. Boom. And it made that a bullet point for me. And those are really easy to use. If I go up to my bullets option, bullets and numbering. I have the choice to use a symbol, and I can pick from any of the symbols that you can get into a font. So if I wanted to use this other phone, I could do that. And now I changed them all to that little phone. Another awesome new advantage of the text editor there. We're almost done, 2 slides left, and then I see that there's a couple of questions, so I'll try to get back around to those. The read-only seek bar, I know I'm going a little fast here at the end, but I just want to get these last 2 in. The read-only seek bar, this was something that we really needed for a long time. I know in general we're trying to create the most interactive, self-exploring courses that we can, but sometimes you still need to have a linear course, and you need to make sure that the user is viewing everything on the slide before they move on to the next slide. One of the problems in Storyline 1 was that as the progress bar moved along, you want the progress bar there so that the learner can see how much time they have left, but they could easily just click the progress bar and fast forward to the end and then hit next. So by changing this setting, which is in the player properties, then you can lock the seek bar so that the learner is not going to be able to drag back and forth on it. And the last new feature that I was going to mention is the autosave. And this is terrific because a lot of new software has been doing this lately, and it's a great feature that is hopefully going to save you a lot of time. You never know when your power is going to go out or your hard drive is going to crash or something. So it's nice to have a backup automatically saved. So with this setting checked, and this is in the storyline settings, storyline options, with that checked, then Storyline will, in the background, save the recovery information however often you choose here. The default is 10 minutes. You could set it to 1 minute if you want, but you might start using a lot of memory and processing power if you did that. You can change it to every 30 minutes if you like to live life on the edge. 10 minutes works pretty well for me there. I can recreate 10 minutes of work without a lot of hassle there. So that is all my slides. Let me jump over here and take a look at some of your questions in here. Do the new features function the same way on iPads? They did a lot of work on the HTML5 output, and it works awesome now, awesomer, I should say, on mobile devices. So it works great on iPad and Android tablets. They also updated the app that you can get from the iTunes store as well, and so that's updated, and things are even more awesome there. And now there's an Android app that you can get from the Google Play Store as well that is like the iOS app. Personally, for me, I prefer to just make sure whatever I'm building is going to work in HTML5, and that way I don't have to bounce people out to the app from the store. They don't have to have it in 2 different places that way, and I know that one outfit's going to work in most places. Before, you had to be a little bit more careful and do a lot more testing with the HTML5. Now, the HTML5 works really well on a lot of platforms. And so, as from what I've seen, all these new features work with the iPad. All right. Let's see what we have here. Can you open a course made in Storyline 1 in Storyline 2 and continue to update the course in the new version? Yes, yeah. So you open a Storyline 1 course into Storyline 2, and it will prompt you, and it will save a backup copy of the Storyline 1 so that if you need to go back to that one, you can. And then you can continue working in Storyline 2 and making changes there. But just keep in mind, whatever changes you make in Storyline 2, you're not going to be able to roll those back into the Storyline 1 version of the course. You would have to rebuild them in that version of the course. Let's see, what else do we have here? Can we sync a single video or audio file across multiple files? No, sorry, that feature does not seem to have made it into Storyline 2. I would suggest that you go on over to the Articulate website and submit a feature request there for that. All right, well, I'm going to give it just a minute to see if there's any other questions. If not, then I am done, and I'll shut this thing down in just a minute. I'm just going to give, since there's a little bit of a delay, I'm just going to give it a minute to make sure that any other questions can come in. And as I said, the video should be available very soon on the YouTube page for this, and I will post the story file online as well so that folks can download that and play with it there too. Thank you all very much for attending. I appreciate it. And please shoot me a note or leave something in the comments on the Hangout site. Let me know if this is what you expected to see, if you were excited to see this. Let me know if you'd like to see more of these things. And thank you very much again. It's so hard to wait 60 seconds. All right, folks, I'm going to stop the broadcast then. Thank you again. If you do think of more questions, just post them on the Google Hangouts page.